This is RamView.
It's hot out there. Let's blow them off the line of scrimmage. Headline,
Live from the RamCave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the June 23rd, 2025 edition, brought to you by Kistler Law Firm. Injured in an auto accident, need help, got questions? Call Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. That's Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. And check out KistlerLawFirm.com. That's one word, KistlerLawFirm.com. Kistler Law, they've been fighting for you since 92. And by Temple City Auto Repair, having some auto issues, get yourself some John and Henry at TempleCityAutoRepair.com. I feel a little disheveled today. My hair feels a little messed up. I'm not wearing a collared shirt or a Hawaiian shirt, but I got my KHJ shirt on. And if you're from SoCal, you know what KHJ meant around here 1,000 years ago. Not a lot of stuff happening, not a lot of breaking news, not a lot of transactions. So I'm going to dip into the vault, dip into the well here a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the Rams 53-man roster. I wasn't going to say anything because I saw it on a couple of other podcasts. And then I saw Cam DeSilva on Rams Wire had it. And so now I know where everyone got it because Cam DeSilva's pretty good, and I'm thinking podcasters were just looking to lift. I'm not going to go break down the 53, but I did like some of Cam DeSilva's points and some of the things he came up with, which is pretty interesting. And then we're going to do a little around the NFL and other places very briefly, and then we're going to dive into things that made me a Ram fan. And I'm really going to go back. I'm going to go back to the 70s. And you're welcome to chime in on what made you a Ram fan. My demographic, our demographic, according to everything that YouTube sends me, are guys my age. And so I'm thinking, do the 70s now, and then maybe when we get to the next week we can do the 80s as news breaks and everything, and then the 90s we can just talk about seminal moments in that decade, right? And there were some games that were big that I didn't see, 1970, 71, but I drifted into the Rams in 72. So here we go. Let's take a quick look at this. Rams are opening training camp to the public at LMU on Thursday, July 24th. If you have a chance to go, great. I had great connections down in Irvine, so I haven't gone for a while. I'd love to go this time, but I am actually, maybe I'll catch it at the end of the month or in early August. I am working a kids camp July 21st through the 25th, so I won't be there when it opens. But hey, go guys if you're in the neighborhood, and let me know what it looks like and how it feels. What's the sense? You know, there are times you go to these Rams camps and you're like, whoa, these guys are having fun and they seem very optimistic. I've been around some other camps where they don't feel that way. So go check that out. Speaking of Cam DeSilva and Rams Wire, they do a pretty solid job there, and they seem to be the source for a lot of podcasts. I'm not bagging on the podcast. I understand when you've got content you got to fill, but I think there's other places to go, and I'm not accusing people of lifting. It's just man, sometimes you need your own ideas. Anyway, so Cam DeSilva does a good job, and he had a projected 53-man roster for the Rams. And, of course, we'll start with the quarterbacks, and then we'll just work our way through. And, again, I'm not going to break it all down, but I did find a couple things interesting there. The first one was he has Stafford and Jimmy G and no Stetson Bennett. And I think at this point, because you get that little waiver there with that third quarterback, Stetson Bennett probably doesn't need to be on the active roster. Maybe he gets cut and goes to the practice squad. Rams still haven't signed another arm for camp. He's going to get all the playing time, the bulk of the playing time, because Jimmy G's got kind of a glass jaw. But DeSilva left Stetson Bennett off the 53-man. But he did keep Ronnie Rivers, which I thought was interesting, with Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, and Jarquez Hunter. And he kept Ronnie Rivers. Rivers is a survivor, right? I would, but it would sound derogatory, I would describe him as the cockroach that survives the blast. But Ronnie Rivers is the football player who won't die. He just won't go away. I like the guy. I like him a lot. I think he's been very serviceable when he's played, and it was interesting that he kept him on that roster. That De Silva kept him on that roster. Rams keeping 6 receivers, and he gave the final 2 spots to Xavier Smith and Kanata Mumpfield. I like that. It made sense. The other one that I thought was interesting, because I heard other people talking about Davis Allen could be the odd man out. De Silva has the Rams keeping all 4 of the main tight ends, meaning Davis Allen, Colby Parkinson, Terrence Ferguson, and of course Tyler Higbee. And that makes sense. The Rams finished last season. When they brought Higbee back, they had 4 active tight ends. And that really plays into the whole 12 personnel that McVay is said to be leaning into. So you've got Higbee, you've got Ferguson, you've got Parkinson, and you've got Davis Allen. So De Silva made an accounting for 4 tight ends. I thought that was a good job. He was excellent across the offensive line, but he did leave out KT Leviston and Justin Diedick. Diedick, who started several games last year, acquitted himself nicely for an undrafted free agent, undersized out of USC. I'd hate to lose Leviston, but you could see them going to the practice squad. But what added more intrigue for me was the fact, because I've seen it in other places. In fact, I think Mr. Powers brought it up here out in Irvine, brought it up on one of our other shows, is De Silva had Dylan McMahon making the active 53. And I've seen some depth charts that have Bo Limmer moving out as a backup at guard. Which he's capable of, but McMahon was on the Philly practice squad when the Rams signed him, and he was actually drafted about 10 slots ahead of Bo Limmer in the 6th round last year, and so I think Mr. Powers says don't sleep on Dylan McMahon, and I thought it was interesting. I saw him on a depth chart, and then I saw De Silva has him making the roster as one of the Rams offensive linemen. So that was something interesting. You're right. That's something that's, I know it's Nerdville to think about who your third center is going to be, but I'm sorry. I love this kind of stuff, and I hope you guys do too. The defensive line was no surprises. The only odd name that was out there was DeJuan Johnson. I think it was Laurel Murchison that got the nod over DeJuan Johnson. I like DeJuan Johnson. I think for 2 years as Mr. Irrelevant, he's given the Rams some nice clicks. And if it means he has to go someplace else, I do not think he's a practice squad guy. I think if he gets cut, he's not going to end up on the practice squad. My belief is somebody will pick him up because he's shown that he can play in the NFL. The edge, there were no surprises. At the linebacker spot, all the usual suspects that you expected to be there: Spates, Landman, Pupal, and those guys. The one that was interesting to me was Troy Reeder over Sean Dolak. And again, I've said it before, Reeder's on a short lease, but he's comfort food for the coaching staff, right? Just like JJ was, John Johnson, just like Christian Roseboom was. Reeder's a guy they're comfortable with, kind of half player, half coach. He did have Troy Reeder ahead of Sean Dolak, the heralded undrafted free agent. So that was interesting to see, and we'll see how that plays out. De Silva projected 5 cornerbacks and all the usual guys there that we would expect: Okillo, Darius, Emmanuel Forbes, and of course Kobe Durant. And then, of course, the guy that was on the outside looking in was Darian Kendrick. And that's one to keep an eye on to see how that plays out. Safety room was as expected. And Josh Wallace was that 5th corner, the undrafted free agent from a year ago. And Darian Kendrick on the outside looking in. And then the little, it could be a little bit of semantics, is that if Quentin Lake plays that star position, he's kind of listed as your slot corner, but we know that's kind of a flex position a little bit. But they got him at safety. And of course, Cam Curl, Cam Kitchens, and Jalen McCullough, who was the surprise UDFA last year. Special teams all looked the same. All right, Tim Burns. I like tight end usage, and always felt McVay should open up the position more. Yeah, I just think he has particulars, right? There's guys he wants, and one of the things I keep hearing repeated about, the Rams always wanting to trade up, and this year it was T-Mac for Carolina. Last year it was all about Brock Bowers, and then there was all the talk Rams wanting to trade up in 23 for Dalton Kincaid. And if you remember going into that draft, for most, if not all of the draft season, from leading up to the combine, coming out of the combine, Dalton Kincaid was projected as high second round, kind of in that Steve Avila zone. And it wasn't like he jumped all the way up. He was drafted by the Bills, at 27, 26, someplace in there. So he had an 8-9 slot bump. It wasn't a big jump to the first round. And so I just wanted to get that out there. But yeah, McVay's always looking for the tight end, as the Rams always are doing something, right? So I am intrigued. I like the idea of keeping all four. I like the idea of keeping those 6 receivers. I like the idea if you could use Blake Corum, maybe Jarquez, or some of these guys to return kickoffs and keep Xavier Smith returning punts and using him sporadically in the offense, because I think he has something to give there. And then you're running Kanata has the other, Smith 5, Kanata 6. And everyone's saying keep an eye on him. So that's kind of anxious. I'm anxious to see how that plays out. A healthy Jordan Whittington, a utilized Tutu Atwell, and of course, fingers and toes crossed for healthy Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. All right, let's see. USA expat. Remember in the 60s era, parents to our all-pro offensive linemen were groomed for years before stepping in. You know what? I don't remember the 60s, but I do remember the 70s. Rich Saul was drafted in 70, didn't become the starter until 75, right? And I know France and Hera had to wait a year from 75 into 76, waiting for Cowan and Shabelli to retire. And then, of course, Slater was drafted in 76, and it wasn't until really about 79 that he beat out John Williams at that right tackle spot. So that's what I remember, USA expat. That's what I remember. So correct me if I'm wrong. USA expat, me too. Huge Snow fan here, Bill. Let's see. I didn't see that one. Oh, there we go. Roman Gabriel and Jack Snow are the reason I am a Rams fan. Okay. Harold Jackson, John Hadel to Harold Jackson was mine. That story didn't last as long. Does Indy's Richardson finally break through, or does he fade? I saw a column today that said that his shoulder is supposed to be ready by training camp, and you go with it, right? But that was the deal, right? Remember how high the Colts drafted him? He only had 14 college starts. And it was like, are you crazy? And I think the longer we look at this, I think that's the secret sauce. How many college starts did you have? And I think that plays so much into it. Yeah. So yeah, I liked Richardson when I saw him play against the Rams, but he's not consistent, right? He's not consistent. He gives you everything that probably Kyler Murray gives you and 6 inches more. It's just, even Kyler Murray's more polished than Anthony Richardson at this point. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Yes, Steve Ramirez says, I keep hearing Jones is the favorite for the Colts. I hear the same thing, the stuff I've read, some of the stuff I've heard through other podcasts. That's absolutely true. All right, I'm Joe Terosian, a sports writer for 21 years now. I contribute to Mid-Valley Sports, and you can check us out there. Mr. Burns provides some content as well, and I write books. My books are on Amazon. You can check them out. Type in Joe Terosian, 3 football books, 1 book about the Rams, novel about the Rams playing the Packers in the NFC Championship game. Hey, guys, I got to pay for my trip cross country this August, so I need some support there. Also, the biggest support, of course, comes from Kistler Law, as they are our key sponsor, and we want to thank them for everything they do. If you are in California, especially California, give them a call. Call that number. Ask me for that number again. Kistler Law, you can find them online. They know their business. They really, if you're injured in an auto accident, this has been over a year now for my wife, is that she was hit by a car walking, And I didn't know who to call because I don't call my car insurance for that, do I? And Kistler Law stepped in and saved the day for us. So do check those folks out. Also check us out on Spotify and iHeart. Getting a tiny bit of traction there. We could use some help moving that forward. All right, let's go around the NFL and other places. Tim Burns, Steeler fan Rob charges you room and board. He probably will. I'm not going to stay with Steeler fan Rob. Maybe 2 nights on the way out. If I stayed with him any longer, he'd lose his mind. I'd lose my mind too, right? And Steeler fan Rob, he fancies himself as a player. Bill, another reason I'm a Rams fan is because the Philadelphia Eagles were so bad in the 70s, and my friends pick other teams and follow. I picked the Rams because of Roman Gabriel. So you got Roman Gabriel. You were into Roman Gabriel before he became an Eagle. Am I reading that right, Bill? That's interesting. That's really interesting. I thought that 73 season for the Eagles was so much fun to, watch this week in the NFL and NFL Game of the Week and the highlights of him throwing to Harold Carmichael and Charlie Young, Tom Sullivan, Bill Berge. No, was Bill Berge there yet? No, he wasn't. Yeah, Jerry Sizemore and Randy Logan and those guys. I kind of like that 73 Eagles team. I think they finished 5-8-1. I think that's what it was. But Gabriel's comeback player of the year and stuff. And so that's interesting that you picked him up before he became an Eagle. Steve Ramirez also heard that Browns quarterback will be either Flacco or Pickett via Browns reporter. Yeah, I don't think Shador did himself any favors. I don't think he's going to get put in the street. But yeah, you could start Flacco by week 3. He's benched, right? Or he's hurt. And we'll see how they go from there. Steve Ramirez, I am a Rams fan because of Dick Enberg and Roman Gabriel. That's interesting that you say Enberg because I'm going to mention Enberg a lot here in a few minutes. Okay, around the NFL and other places, not a lot happening in the NFC West. I did connect with a Cardinal fan who's been clicking on and asking questions on Friday or Saturday morning's broadcast, and he's been telling me he likes the Cardinals. He thinks they're deep along the defensive front because I was questioning the age of Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson holding up. He likes Walter Nolan. Then I asked him about Kyler Murray. He's rooting for him. He feels like he's a bit iffy, and that's fair. That's fair. I've always said I think Kyler Murray's spectacular, but he's a splash player. I don't find him consistent enough to win the big one with. And I do like Jonathan Gannon. I do like what Monty Ossenford have done with the Cardinals. That's a team that scares me. It really does. And that's why I'm so high, not just on the Rams, but I'm high on the Cardinals and the Seahawks, which means 6 games on this 49ers schedule that people are writing off, saying the 49ers schedule is going to be so easy and they're going to cruise. Given the 49ers' age, uncertainty on the offensive line, some uncertainty at receiver, no, I'm not feeling good about the 49ers. And I think these teams like the Cardinals, Seahawks, and of course the Rams are going to be trouble for them. And, they can actually go 2-4 in this division. Now, again, we know perfect world if everyone stays healthy, right? If everyone stays healthy. Yeah, ask the Indiana Pacers about everyone staying healthy, which we'll get to shortly. Let's see what we got here real quick. It's a slow news day in the NFL. I saw a link. I didn't click on it, but it was like, when there's a piece on Jair Alexander and it says Alexander will be wearing the same jersey in Baltimore as he did in Green Bay, it's a seriously slow news day around the NFL. And then finally, I was rooting for the Pacers last night, but there's little to nothing to dislike or not like about the Thunder, right? Classy dudes. I like them. You root for them. When people say they were bored, I saw a little bit of Colin Cowherd today when I running around. I didn't care. You don't care because you don't know anything about basketball, man. I'm sorry. I know. I don't think it's great basketball that's being played, but I think some of the basketball the Pacers and the Thunder played this postseason is some of the best basketball I've seen in a long, long time. And, they keep talking about there's no stars to watch. No, you know what the star is in basketball? It's called basketball. It's moving the ball, moving without the ball, and defense. And I was really, I don't care about the ratings because I don't care about the NBA. But I thought this was the first series that I was actually really invested in. I did like the Denver team. I love watching Jokic play and everything. But all around, just the collective of what the Pacers and Thunder did, I thought it was great basketball. I really did. I thought it was really great. It was really good basketball. Not what it was at one time, but better than anything we've seen for a number of years. Final note, weren't we saying on Saturday the NBA Finals needed to end in May? And Tyrese Halliburton blows out his Achilles 22 days into June. Yeah, I am all for the season needs to be shortened. And the season needs to be shortened. And, of course, the playoffs need to be shortened as well. And then final note, I had this question, and maybe you guys have it. Does OKC recognize franchise history? Do they recognize Seattle? Or when they moved to OKC, did they leave all the Sonics colors and history and tradition in Seattle just in case there was another franchise pulling in? Because I was watching that, and I'm thinking, man, I was thinking about jonesing for some Fred Brown, Lonnie Shelton, and Jack Sikma. And so I was just curious, do they acknowledge the Sonic history, or is it still like for everything Art Modell did, right? I know he broke the heart of Cleveland fans, but the classiest thing he did was he left the Cleveland colors, traditions, and history in Cleveland and just took, the players with him and started something new in Baltimore. And if you got anything to be grateful for in Cleveland, you should be. At least he did that. You got to keep the Browns. I was curious if OKC did that with Seattle, or are they, are there, Gus Williams jerseys hanging up in OKC? Just kind of curious about that. All right, let's see what we got here. Some folks clicked on. Let's see. USA Expat. My first Rams running back was Dick Bass. Wow. Yeah, of course, I never saw Dick Bass. I heard him on the radio with Bob Starr calling games. More legendary, just like my experience with Roman Gabriel. I didn't catch Roman Gabriel really on the field till 72, and that was such a bad season. I didn't have the emotional sting when he was traded like some of you guys did, especially Steve Ramirez. Yeah, so Dick Bass. All right. Tim Burns, the 49ers are getting run. They don't deserve. I don't know what to say about that. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are really high on them, and I think they're overlooking a lot of things. But, we'll see how it plays out. USA Expat, not to brag, but I believe I am the longest running Rams fan here. Okay, October 1st, 1972. Okay, that's the first time I saw a Rams game or a piece of a Rams game. And I wasn't solidified till October 14th, 73. So definitely you got me beat, USA Expat. Tim Burns, should Ruggs get another NFL shot? I think so, if he is still that guy. I just, if he's out, he's out, right? If the state of Nevada said he's somehow paid enough of his debt, I guess he gets a shot. I just can't believe what he did, driving 10,000 miles an hour under the influence and killing somebody, I honestly, in that case, if he's done everything he could for release, I would literally, if I'm a franchise in the NFL, I would go to the family. I would go to the family of the woman he killed and just say, hey, you know what? We're getting some movement here, thinking we want to sign him. Would it upset you, right? Have you moved on? Because that's a big ask, right? That's a really big ask. And I wouldn't want him with the Rams. There we go. Maybe that answers the question. I wouldn't want him with the Rams. USA Expat, NBA, where in the fourth quarter of the playoffs the rule book goes out the window? Oh, NBA, where in the fourth quarter of the rule book? Man, it goes out the window pretty fast in the NBA, right? I loved how they called it the gather step. That was a great debate that Richard Jefferson was having last night. Tim Burns, Sonics were good. Kemp, Peyton, Detlef Shrimp. Oh man, dude, I thought you had a little more reach in you, Mr. Burns. John Johnson, DJ and Gus, Jack Sikma, Wally Walker, Vinny Johnson, the microwave before he went to Detroit. What about those guys? Talvin Skinner, Frank Olenek, Marvin Webster. Yeah, Spencer Haywood, Bruce Seals, Slick Watts. Come on, man. You want to bump? I'll bump. Hated the Sonics, though. Steve Ramirez, September 1969 for me. First in-person game, October 1969 versus 49ers. Good season because you saw wins in all those games. Tim Burns, I was 5 during Sigma. Okay, all right. There you go. Hey, Burns, how big are you? How big? I'm 6'1". Somehow I get the feeling you're built more like offensive lineman type. Let me know how tall you are and stuff, because I don't want to talk down to you. So let me know. Okay, let's get to this. On this date in Rams history, nothing, not really. I shared it on Saturday. Rams traded Bob Brown to the Oakland Raiders for Harry Shue and Kit McLaughlin. Shue played with the Rams from 72 through 71 through 73, and then moved on, and McLaughlin never did anything. Brown played a couple years with the Raiders and then retired. One of the draft picks the Rams sent to the Raiders with Bob Brown turned into John Vella, an offensive lineman who had some good years with the Raiders. All right, let's look at the things that were seminal moments for me. Very, I don't know if this sounds a bit narcissistic, very seminal moments in me becoming a Rams fan, and I'll share them with you. Tim Burns, 6'4", 260. Okay, all right. Whatever you say. I'm not going to get in your grill, man. You're cool. Okay. Jesus, I hope the Rams enjoyed their time in Maui. I think the Rams enjoyed their time in Maui, but I sure didn't get anything out of it. I was expecting a little more video, a little more talk. I know you guys know what my day job is, and I'm going to it's going to sound really counter. I just don't care about good deeds. I just don't. I don't care about, we did this for the community. You can do it without telling us, right? You can do it without telling us. That's fine. Anyway, I was disappointed in the Maui thing. Maybe if I had gone, I'd feel better. Okay, I don't know what this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. About 21 instances that really cemented me as a Ram fan. This is stuff that never leaves me. Falcons beat the Rams for the first time 31-3. Nobis has a pick 6 in Atlanta, October 1st, 1972. Saw this coming home from church, just where I placed it. And it was pretty brutal. About a month later, November 5th, in my back room with my brother, listened to the entire game where the Rams played the Falcons again. Dick Enberg, right? Dick Enberg with Don Drysdale as his color guy, okay? Rams control and beat the Falcons 20-7. Now, here was the interesting thing. Rams are humiliating that 31-3 blowout to the Falcons 1st of October. November 5th, Rams win that game 20-7 in the Coliseum, the rematch against the Falcons. The Rams improve to 5-2-1. The Falcons go to 4-4. The San Francisco 49ers, who finished the season 8-5-1 and win the NFC West, they're 3-4-1. They only lost one game after week 8, and that was to the Rams. Rams beat them twice that year. And at that point, that was the high water mark for the Rams, 5-2-1. And I remember all the positivity after listening to that game. Well, that's it. That was all from 72. In 73, pretty big deal. Rams beat the Kansas City Chiefs 23-13 in Kansas City. Watched that one. I didn't go to church that day. And McCutcheon caught a touchdown pass. And that was the first time I ever saw a fake field goal. And I can't even remember if it was planned or it was a botched snap. Steve Priest ran it in. I thought it was the coolest thing I ever saw. I remember reading in the newspaper talking about, kind of an anecdote that Jim Bertelsen brought 6 different pairs of shoes to figure out what works best on the surface at Arrowhead. That was a great day for the Rams. About a month later, the absolute cementing moment for me as a Ram fan, in our back room again, Dick Enberg on the call, October 14th, 1973, Rams beat the Cowboys 37-31. In fact, the dedication for Tangent Dreams is to that Ram win, Dick Enberg and Al Clark. That was the game where Harold Jackson scored 4 first-half touchdown passes. And literally in my head, I still hear Enberg saying, play action fake to Bertelsen. Hadel's going long, long, long to Jackson. Touchdown, One was Harold has it at the 10, and he will dance in for the score. He absolutely torched Charlie Waters. And the Cowboys came back. and it was 37-31, and they were driving, and of course, Al Clark made the pick on Roger Staubach to seal it. That one is cemented in Rams history for me. 2 weeks later, watch the Rams lose to the Vikings, and they lost to the Vikings 10-9. Dave Raid kicked 3 field goals. I think Chuck Foreman caught the 1 touchdown pass. Watching the game, and I wasn't hip to 1969 yet. Okay, I wasn't hip to the Rams struggling in Bloomington, and so, but I do remember that game because it was the Rams' first loss of the season. And then, of course, December 23rd, Rams lost in the playoffs to the Cowboys 27-16. That was the game they were down 17-0, came back and made it 17-16, and that was where Drew Pearson made the catch when Steve Priest went for the pick instead of the hit. And they knifed him between Priest and Eddie McMillan, and Pearson was off to the races. Rams turned the ball over on their first 2 possessions. John Hadel passed through an interception. McCutcheon fumbled. And it was a young Ram team, not Hadel, of course. It was a young Ram team that got its bearings, but just not enough. But I remember that game. And again, I wasn't feeling anything in terms of I hate the Cowboys in terms of some jinx. I didn't know. Hadn't wrapped any history to that then. In 74, listen to it on the radio again. Dick Enberg, man. Dick Enberg's all over the place here. Rams beat the Vikings. Game's blacked out. What's his name? Jack Snow makes a one-handed catch in the end zone for the game-winning score, and the Rams win them 20-17. James Harris runs for a couple touchdowns, and Ken Geddes ices the game with a pick. Do you remember that one? Let's see. That same year, I went to my first playoff game. Rams beat the Redskins 19-10. That was the game. That was December 22nd, 1974. That was the game. I'm sitting in the closed in, and this African American woman and I are sitting. She was there by herself, and she had binoculars because you needed them in those days. And we shared them. We shared popcorn and everything. And she was, Rams are going to the Super Bowl. And of course, that was the Isaiah Robertson pick on Billy Kilmer, and maybe the last pick of Billy Kilmer's career. I don't know, but that was the last game for Billy Kilmer. I'm not Billy Kilmer, Sonny Jurgensen. I'm sorry. That was the last game for Sonny Jurgensen. But there was a guy that was a George Allen fan, and he was about 2 rows behind us, and all he screamed all day was Allen's revenge, Allen's revenge. And then Robertson got that pick to ice the game, and he left, and everyone was throwing popcorn at him, right? No one was throwing punches. They were throwing popcorn. Let's see. Then a week later, Rams lost in Bloomington, and I started to notice the pattern. Rams lost to the Vikings 14-10. Harold Jackson had a great game, had a great touchdown. That was the game. The pass got tipped at the goal line. Hilgenberg got the pick. I remember former Herald Examiner writer and broadcaster Bud Ferrillo on KABC being furious at the end of that game on the radio, on TV when he did his sports spot. Next one came Monday Night Football. Rams beat Philly 42-3. What I remember about that was a great touchdown score. I think it was the last score of Jack Snow's career. And also Isaiah Robertson had another long pick 6. And it came just after Howard Cosell was saying one of the better players in the NFL, but he's not having a great year. And then, of course, Robertson does the pick 6, and Cosell immediately goes full Colin Cowherd. He says, oh, truly one of the greatest players in the NFL, yada, yada, yada. And then Rams beat the Steelers in a Saturday night game. Ron Jaworski on the quarterback draw in the fourth quarter. That was the Rob Scribner game because McCutcheon was out, Bertelsen was out. Rob Scribner ran for 67 yards, and the Rams won that game 10-3. Bradshaw got benched for Jefferson Street Joe. And again, another Ram team looked like it was going to the Super Bowl. And January 4th, NFC Championship game, I'm in the closing of the Coliseum again, and the Rams lose to the Cowboys 37-7. I remember we took the bus from El Monte to downtown LA, back home. That's how into the Rams we were in those days. And I remember leaving. There was this African-American, and he's in a 3-piece suit. He's in a 3-piece suit, and he is furious because I think he bet on the money, put money on the Rams. And he's sitting there, and he had one leg over his knee, and he goes, all you cheap Ram fans, you're going to wake up tomorrow, and you're going to see the Rams won 42-37. When I left, it was 34-7. I was right there when Capoletti plunged in for the final touchdown. I stayed for that, and then we had to go get to our bus stop. But that was a hard day, and I never forgot. Before I get moving on here, let me see what else we got. Let's see. Neil Gonzalez. Dang, KHJ, old school. Also, I liked KNAC. I never listened to KNAC. It was always AM, KHJ. Only drug users used FM in those days. That's what we thought. Anyway, Tim Burns. I used to think Bill Bates walking on the Dallas Cowboys was a cool story. Looking through today's lenses, he was a UDFA. He could hit hard. He had a great career, Bill Bates did. Great career. But he was a Cowboy, so I hated him. There we go. Michael Negretti, is that Dr. Johnny Fever and WKRP in Cincinnati, or is that Pastor Joe? And it's a Stone Cold Groove, my man. I like to say Stone Cold Groove.
Stone Groove, my man.
Yeah, it is my KHJ shirt. It's one of my favorite shirts. Thank you very much. Jesus, I miss football. So do I. Steve Ramirez, if only Harold Jackson turned toward the end zone instead of out of bounds in the 74 title game. Do you remember how he weaved through traffic? I'm just guessing the dude was gassed. I don't know what it was. All I could figure is the dude was gassed. I'm glad you remember that, Steve. That's really interesting. Okay, 76 season. That was Pat Hayden was in full swing. Jaworski was there. James Harris was there. And Rams beat the Dolphins. They were down 14-0 at half, 21-7 in the third. And the Rams beat the Dolphins 31-28. Ron Jesse caught 7 passes for 220 yards. James Harris had 436. One of the greatest, just a great day for James Harris. And they came back in the Orange Bowl and beat the Dolphins 31-28. And you thought everything was all set. A week later, Monday Night Football, of course, blacked out. Thank you, Pete Rozelle. The 49ers and the Gold Rush, Jimmy Webb, Cleveland Elam, Cedric Hardman, Tommy Hart, they sack James Harris 10 times. He injures his shoulder. They beat the Rams 16-0. Again, losing to the 49ers in those days was weird because the Rams lost to them at home in 75 on a 54-yard field goal by Nick Mickemeyer. Heard that on the radio. And then the next year they come back and win in Los Angeles again. And that one was a brutal one. And then, everything kind of fell apart after that in terms of got to put, everyone was all hot for Pat Hayden. And Harris ended up leading the league in percentage passing, I think, that year too. 77, Rams made the move. Harris gets sent to the Chargers. Jaworski is exchanged contracts for Charlie Young, and Joe Namath comes in, starts 4 games for the Rams. They're 2-1. They go on rainy Monday night into Chicago on October 10th. And remember that one? There were a couple throws that Namath made that were pretty good, but the Bears pass rush and everything, they were just teeing off on him. The Bears won 24-3. He was replaced by Pat Hayden, and that was the end of Joe Namath's career. Side note, if you ever read anything about Joe Namath, Hall of Fame, star, all that kind of stuff, try to find the stuff that Chuck Knox, Pat Hayden, and others said about him when he was benched and humiliated in week 4 on that rainy Monday night in Chicago. They said he was nothing but a pro's pro and an encourager the rest of that season. And that's one of the great things I thought about Joe Namath, knowing how far he had fallen, but he still remained a team guy. And I thought that was a great Joe Namath story. And I will argue, listening to the Mud Bowl, December 26, 1977, that yes, my brother and I blacked out again. Thank you, Pete Rozelle. Listening to Dick Enberg, his last call with the Rams. Knox should have gone out of the box and put Namath in just to see if he can change something, because Hayden was a disaster. New coach, Ray Malavasi replaces George Allen that replaced Chuck Knox going into the 78 season. I was at George Allen's last game before he got fired, preseason against the Patriots. Rams get off to a good start. Rams beat the Cowboys in the Coliseum 27-14. That's the game that Roger Staubach was quoted as saying, he yelled at the Rams bench saying, "We'll see you chokers in the playoffs." And I remember us going, we don't care. We're going to get you. We hated Roger Staubach, hated the Cowboys. And then, of course, we know everything that fell apart that season when they beat the Rams in the Coliseum 28-0. And then, of course, in 1979, everything was falling apart. Everyone was bailing on the Rams. They lost 3 in a row going into their November 4th game in 79 against the Seahawks. And that was right at the beginning. Speaking of weird correlation, that was right at the beginning of the Iranian hostage crisis. And the Rams went to Seattle. My brother and I, the Rams had lost 3 in a row. We were just upset because, the new golden boy was Jim Zorn and Steve Largent and the young and exciting and innovative Seahawks. And, we were expecting they were going to do something and everyone was going to get all crazy and mock the Rams. Instead, the Rams defense went in there and held them to -7 yards, won 24-0. And it seemed like, wow, we've turned the corner. No, we went to Chicago the next week and lost to a crappy Chicago team. It was after that they put together 4 in a row and went on that run to win the division and, of course, end up in the Super Bowl. Along the way to the Super Bowl, December 30th, 1979, we've talked about it a lot. Ferragamo to Billy Waddy, 21-19. Roger Staubach ends his career on his butt against the Rams defense. January the 6th, 1980, Rams beat Tampa in Tampa, 9-0. And then, of course, January 20th, 1980, pick your poison. Rams should have beat the Steelers. They lost 31-19. I still hold out it was Eddie Brown's fault. A lot of folks hold out Nolan Cromwell dropped that pick 6 in the 3rd, and that would have changed everything. So these are the things that never leave me as a Rams fan. I don't even need notes to talk about these things. And I tried to move on. When the team left, I rooted for the Redskins and I rooted for the Chiefs. That Chiefs team with Steve Bono that had a pretty good year. They ended up losing to the Broncos in the playoffs. I thought I was a big-time Chiefs fan. And then they lost, and within an hour, I was over it. Anytime I mentioned the Rams lost here, it was like a death in the family. I didn't want to look at the newspaper. I didn't want to watch the news. We were so invested in those days and it kind of crystallizes in your head that literally I could talk about all these games and not need notes. And so those were things that kind of made me a Ram fan. I know it's a bit narcissistic. I didn't talk a whole lot of stuff today about everything else because there's just not a lot going on, but I'm happy to look at your memories. And if you have any, throw them at me. I'm happy to talk about them. We'll as things go on, maybe next week, we'll look at the 80s, the seminal games of the 80s. But I think the 70s, I think it almost all boils back around Dick Enberg and the willingness to sit in our back room and just listen to the game on the radio. Now, there we go. Let's see. Steve Ramirez was at the Mud Bowl in the closed end. You were probably more mature than me, Steve. Did you cry? Did you curse? Did you throw something at somebody? I'd be curious to know. All right. I think we're good. Okay. My phone has been ringing and I haven't been answering. There we go. All right, guys. God bless. Take care. I wish I had more stuff for you, but I thought I'd get that in. Tim Burns, imagine if you ended up doing Chiefs View or Taxkins View. Hey, I was huge on the Redskins. I was huge. I love Hail to the Redskins. I had a hog nose. One, they beat the Cowboys, right? They won 3 Super Bowls. I didn't like the Bills, didn't like the Broncos, and I didn't like the Dolphins, right? And so I did want them against the Raiders because I didn't want the Raiders necessarily to win a Super Bowl in Los Angeles, but that Redskin team in '83 was so great that they had clobbered the Rams in the playoffs. And so I was a little back and forth on that Super Bowl. That was such a memorable Super Bowl, right? Especially with the highlight film that came out afterwards. That was Facenda's last NFL Films highlight. All those famous lines he had. But that's when the Raider mystique was still there. That midseason trade for Mike Haynes, and then of course that was the Apple commercial, right? The Macintosh commercial that had the 1984 vibe to it, which was just amazing watching that live. And of course, I was watching it with my nephew, and he goes, "What's this? This is stupid. How come it's in black and white?" And he hadn't read 1984. So there we go. So yeah, I tried to move off the Rams, couldn't do it. Right, I'm like a stepson wanting the love of a stepfather, and would take any kind of scraps he can get. But there was always a belief when we started Mid-Valley Sports in the late 90s, there was always this belief that the Rams were coming home. always. We just knew somewhere the Rams were going to come home, and of course they did. And it's been glorious. All right, let's see. Steve Ramirez, me and my brothers didn't say a word as we drove back to Covina. Most disappointing loss. Maybe I was too young. I remember that loss on radio, and it was raining all day. And of course, it was such a mournful day. But can you imagine? We took the bus home. We took the bus home after the 37-7 loss, and that one was brutal. Brutal. Tim Burns, I was mad but couldn't walk away when the Rams went to St. Louis. I did lose a little track of them from 96 through 98. And then they were just too good to avoid in 99. Still rooting for them. I still felt it when they won. I sounded my barbaric yop. So, yeah, I couldn't. I actually had friends that have picked the Rams back up when they came home, but they were done. They weren't going to be with the Rams. And then, of course, I stumbled into the Sunday Ticket and a DVR. And so since 2005, 2004, I've seen every Rams game. So I suffered for 10 years watching every Rams game, in that the roughest of all eras. So there we go. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. And we will check in with you on Wednesday. All right, guys, God bless. Thanks for hanging out. We will talk to you soon.